Hey, it's Marley from the Energy Boutique with a new episode of ASTRO CLASS. So this week I thought it was super appropriate to talk a little bit about Venus and more specifically about her retrograde, because we do have Venus, the goddess of love, beauty, worth, pleasure, money, going retrograde at 28 degrees in Leo energy here on the 22nd, maybe the 23rd, depending on where it is that you're at. Sometimes time zones matter, but regardless, we are already kind of feeling that standstill. She's already stationed. She's already kind of standing very firm. She just hasn't turned around as of yet. And essentially speaking, when Venus goes retrograde, it's a very, very powerful time. Of course, we're all too familiar with Mercury retrogrades. We know kind of what to expect. You know, it's a cluster F of the mind. Communications fall apart. Plans fall apart. We have to kind of repeat old particular life lessons. But when Venus goes retrograde, all of the heart activations come up for acknowledgement. Venus is a very important, I'm going to say, factor, although all the planets are. And again, just understand that the planets are the, let's call it, impact of the archetypes that we are all kind of built out of. And so when we talk about the fact that, you know, the planets are representing the energies that get manipulated in all of our core personalities, this is why we have the reactions that we do. And when Venus is kind of trucking along and doing her thing, we get to know who it is that we are over and over again through different tough love life lessons, lessons of the heart, reorganizing our values, who and what means most to us, who and what brings us joy and happiness and safety and security. These are all the topics and themes that usually come up right in our face, whether we want to acknowledge them or not, when Venus goes retrograde. So I thought it was an appropriate time to talk a little bit more about Venus and to do a little bit of a background check, if you will, on what Venus is all about and why her cycle is so important to the evolution of all of our souls and our own personal development, and maybe what we could expect from this particular retrograde. So I think it's important to kind of consider the fact that Venus is kind of like our sister planet. You know, we hear about, you know, women are from Venus and men are from Mars, but realistically speaking, Venus is the closest replicated planet to our Earth system, as we've been told. And it's essentially the third brightest, let's say, being in the sky. You know, the sun, of course, is the first one, the moon being the second one, but Venus, she is just as bright. She is just as important. And that's why when she changes kind of direction, our lives change direction in some pretty intense kind of ways, because of course it's revolving around love. And, you know, when you kind of connect the dots at the fact that we essentially are who we are because of the things and because of the people that we love, that is a major topic and theme that many of us are going to be exploring. And we also have to consider in the fact that, you know, we had the true nodes of the moon just shift out of that Taurus and Scorpio axis into the Aries and Libran axis. And why that's important is because for the last 18 months, Venus has been leading us into building and creating ourselves, building ourselves up in a better way, addressing our self-esteem, our self-confidence, finding new value within the relationship of ourselves. And as we've been, you know, self-loving and self-healing, we have been altering our physical realms where relationships, routines, where our money matters, our resources, our long-term plans are concerned. We have really been kind of building, and albeit building out of the collapse of the old, because that was the Scorpio energy that we had to kind of let go of, surrender to, and disconnect from. But Venus has been leading the charge. And we just had the true nodes of the moon shift into the Aries and Libran axis, which means that she has essentially handed over the baton to Mars. Mars is now leading us in this Aries energy. That's where the North Node is. And what we have to be letting go of is the Venus qualities in that Libra sector, which is being too dependent and too considerate of other people in our relationships, and being too interconnected and reliant upon other people, and really disconnecting from other people's thoughts and opinions and interactions in order for us to reestablish who it is that we are, separate from all of these different attachments and connections that we've made, because we're having a change of heart. And we are going through this, self identity crisis thing. And again, we have Mars to thank for that. Chiron, as you know, the wounded healer, going through the Aries energy that Mars is in the rulership of. And so, over the next 18 months, Venus is kind of taking a back seat, but she never truly takes a back seat in our personal lives because she is an inner planet. She's very close to us. Her interactions with some of the other energies from different planets have a major impact on activating our heart chakra and really kind of, again, pivoting and changing direction when she changes direction. And that's why most times, often than not, when Venus goes retrograde, those heart activations come out with a meaning, with a purpose. And a lot of the times, relationship dynamics are the one thing that kind of get hit the most. And there's good reason for that. But just having all of these other aspects kind of overlay with what Venus is about to go through just seems like we're at a very, very pivotal point of transformation. So, her being the third brightest influence in our skies means that we're really going to have to understand what she's about to go through. When she goes retrograde, when she kind of gets drugged, if you will, and moves into the unconscious realm and kind of moves into her inner world, again, all those retrograde words come up. We're in reflection, we're in review, we're in a reworking, a restructuring of all the things that make us feel safe and secure, whether it's people, places, titles, possessions, whatever. We have built ourselves and a life out of the things that we've loved. Now, whether we're still in love with them or not, that's what we contemplate while Venus is retrograde. So she's going to push us out of our comfort zones real quick. And we're going to move into the shadow realm of our heart space. And yes, it's going to be challenging. Yes, it's going to very, very much be a little bit chaotic here. But the whole point is that we're being asked to kind of transform who it is that we are, what it is that we love, who and what is worthy of our time and our energy. We are being asked to basically figure our new selves out and transform from the inside out. Now, does that sound fun? Well, probably not, but we're going to go through it and it's going to be totally worth it once we come out on the other end. And realistically, in Leo energy being the heart and soul of the zodiac, we really do have to stop running and hiding some of the things that have been going on in our heart space that we just haven't had the time or the energy to throw into. So now we really have to slow down and get down to the nitty gritty on what it is that our heart wants for ourselves, with other people, in life. We're going to figure out what it is that we want. And the Leo energy gives us the boldness and the bravery and the courage to actually go after it, which is a lovely thing. Okay, so I want to talk about Venus. Now, you may know her as other names, such as Aphrodite or Persephone, or even Lucifer. And not that I want to go into another Bible rant, but Lucifer is actually very, very much misunderstood, and we don't even really talk about him in the New Testament Bible. That's not something where Lucifer actually came to be. He was essentially the bringer of light. And as you know, the bringer of light is information. It is knowledge. And it is illumination, right? And that's why, I'm bringing this kind of topic up, is because Venus, especially when she goes through her retrograde, that's how she takes us into the shadow realm of our experiences. And when she's in the underworld, who rules the underworld? Pluto. Who is Pluto known as? Hades. What would Hades suggest to us? That we're going to hell. Where is hell? It's Earth. What are we doing? We're coming back down to Earth. We're getting real and raw and vulnerable with our heart space here on this Earth plane. But Lucifer, not that I want to get into a big rant about Lucifer, Lucifer is very, very misunderstood. He should not be demonized or hated against. He is essentially what broke us free of the conformity of quote unquote God's will. He gave us desire, he gave us free will, and he's gotten a very bad rap from that. Now, there is a section, and I'm not one of these ones who can just automatically refer to, the chapter in the Bible, but Lucifer is essentially the light bringer, bringing us information. How he got tied up with the whole fallen angel thing, how he got tied up with the title of Satan or devil or whatever, that is just a very strategic plan by the Roman Catholic Church in order to demonize the one celestial being that actually was for humanity instead of against it. But that's another topic. That's another theme. We want to just kind of understand that Aphrodite, in mythology, Aphrodite was a goddess of love and beauty and worth and money and all this kind of stuff. And she loved flowers and she loved being around the earth and Mother Nature herself. But by other names, she was also the goddess of war and bloodshed. And, that should be a good indication as far as the woman energy goes. Like, F around and find out, right? Everything is peachy keen and roses and butterflies until you really push a woman to the edge of her being able to kind of stay in that peaceful mindset. And then what you're going to get is you're going to get the shadow side, the wrath of a woman. And that's kind of where Persephone comes out, is because she is the goddess of the underworld. So when Venus goes into the underworld with Pluto in Hades and she rules over all of the quote unquote chained souls of the earth, she is basically going within her darkest self, her shadow element, and really kind of unearthing and uncovering the part of the unconscious collective that all the chained souls to earth experience. And she's about to really get real and raw and vulnerable with herself on what it is and who it is that she actually is in life and what it is that she wants to do in life. And once we figure out what we want, we know who we need to be in order to actually get it. So Venus, as the planet in which we talk about in astrology, she is merely representative of that feminine light and dark energy. And depending on where it is that she's at in her cycle, that's the light or the dark that we are going to get. And, in relation to that, kind of the attitude and the vibe that gets triggered in all of us, because we all have feminine light and feminine dark. So with that kind of being said, Venus has a 8-year cycle. And I'm going to throw the orbit that Venus makes in relation to the sun and the moon and the earth. And as you'll see, it is the five-petaled flower of life, if you will. Venus cycles every 8 years, or if you'd rather think of it this way, 5 retrogrades. But the interesting part about Venus is that she only goes retrograde in Aries energy, Gemini energy, Leo energy, Scorpio energy, and Capricorn energy. Now, the degree in which she goes retrograde in those signs, that changes. And the aspects, meaning the interactions that she has with other planets at those calculated degrees that give us a tension, a conflict, or a harmonization, those change from retrograde to retrograde. But she always will go retrograde in one of those signs. Now, let's look at those signs for a second. I think it's interesting. Okay, so Aries energy. Well, that is her oppositional energy because Mars, the god of war, the masculine energy, rules over Aries energy. So for Venus to be in Aries energy, she's already uncomfortable, but to go into the unconscious or darker part of self in Aries energy, that's the spiritual warrior, right? So it makes sense that we have to go retrograde in that Aries energy for Venus to do that, because we all need to align with our aggressive selves, with our passions, with our desires, with that assertion and aggression and those leadership qualities, with that warrior type of spirit, which Aries very much is. So it makes sense that she would have to go kind of tap into those parts of self. And seeing as the Aries energy is the ego, because that's the very first sign of the zodiac, where we bring spirit, bring soul into animation and create this ego avatar that will get us through life, of course, it makes sense that we would have to go retrograde in that particular energy in order to constantly be evolving our egoic identity. So, the Aries energy makes sense. The Gemini energy actually makes sense because the Gemini energy is the mind, the ego mind versus the higher mind, the ego self versus the higher self, the inner realm versus the outer realm. Gemini energy is when we formulate thoughts and ideas and take information in and really kind of form new opinions about it. And of course, when we have new information come in, i.e. maybe that your partner isn't as faithful as you thought they were, well, that is going to change the relationship dynamic, the perspective, the way that you feel about it, the conversations that need to be had. Maybe Gemini energy illuminating new information and details about, roles and responsibilities within the job. Well, maybe that's not so happy or lucky, especially, oh, okay, I'm getting a raise, but now I have to take in all this information. Well, does this make me still love what I do, or does it change the way that I feel about what it is that I've been doing? So of course, that makes sense that we would go retrograde in that Gemini energy, because we would have to take a time out to reflect not only about the changes going on within us, but it's almost like the external realm gives us information, details, different perspectives and opinions that we would have to move inward with ourselves and kind of mull over. So, that makes sense. Here we are in the Leo energy. It makes sense for, Venus to only be able to go retrograde in the heart and soul of the zodiac, because sometimes we need a change of heart. Sometimes we need our soul self to reveal a new mission, a new purpose. The Leo energy is also how we are unique within ourselves, individual within ourselves, but it's also the most real, raw, and vulnerable form of expression of self. That's that Leo energy. So it's almost like when Venus goes retrograde in Leo energy, not only are we doing a deep dive into the heart space, not only are we kind of identifying what it is that we want to do with ourselves, but it almost feels like we are gifted with the opportunity to kind of see where a new mission, a new purpose, a new heart-aligned calling is kind of screaming our names. So it would make sense for sure that we would have a retrograde in this Leo energy. Scorpio energy is the shadow self. It's where we merge the shadow with the light self. And that, Scorpio energy is, yes, emotional and spiritual in nature. However, is where true transformation takes place. Like Scorpio energy, it rules over that 8th house. And having Pluto, the great destroyer himself, rule over that particular energy, it would make sense that we would have to go retrograde and move into the depths of our soul, of our emotions, of our pain, of our trauma, of our being, and understand by unearthing the darkest parts of self, how that is essentially either preventing us from really going after what it is that we want, or preventing us from being the person that we need to be in order to get the things that we want in life. So, to have that retrograde energy in Scorpio energy, it totally makes sense. And then the Capricorn energy, to kind of tally it all up, if you will, the Capricorn energy is karma. It's roles, it's responsibility, it's structure, it's who we are out in the world and the duty, karmically speaking, that we have to fulfill here in this lifetime. So it 100% makes sense that, those are the 5 signs that Venus only goes retrograde in. It's a fascinating concept. So, looking at the diagram, if you will, you'll see that here's 2023, we are about to finish, if you will, the last petal of Venus's last cycle. And in I guess if you want to look at it this way, yes, we're closing things out, but when she goes retrograde, that's actually the very beginning of this next new cycle. So we kind of have another overlap of karmic chapters ending and beginning, which, that's been a common theme ever since the Great Awakening goes. But to have Venus, kind of retrograding in the heart and soul of the zodiac, this is a big deal. It's taking place at 28 degrees, which is almost the end of that cycle. The energy cycle is only 30 degrees there. So she went all the way to the end. She's seen the end coming. She's seen that Virgo energy that Mars, her counterpart, already left her for. We'll talk about that in a second. And she's like, you know what? No, not really feeling it. I think I'm going to have to go retrograde, really move within myself, really review and reflect and reevaluate a couple of things. I'm not ready to leave the heart and soul of the zodiac. So why I want to bring Mars into this is because, Mars is the masculine, Venus is the feminine, and they are the cosmic lovers of the zodiac, and they spend eternity chasing each other through all the different signs, just going within their own interactions, their own orbit. Very rarely do they come together and conjunct, sit on top of each other, team up with, get that lover's kiss going. Very rarely does that happen. And they came so close to having it happen here in the Leo energy. They were within 5 degrees. They were within orb of each other. They were almost reaching out their hands and having their fingertips touch in a very, romantic kind of way. They knew they were never going to come close enough to kiss, but they were reaching out for each other to hopefully get that spark, to get that touch. And it's so interesting because they came so close to being able to kind of reset each other and restart the cycle. They won't actually do that until February, heads up, spoiler alert. But what is interesting is if you could visualize this as a romance movie, it's like the masculine energy, Mars, he was just trucking through, and he looked back right when he was at that final degree of the Leo energy, and he reached out his hand to try and touch his goddess Venus, if you will, before he got sucked into a new energy. But the masculine energy knows that it's time to heal right now. The masculine energy of the collective needs healing, needs to be rebuilt, needs to be transformed. This is why the last couple of years, the toxic masculinity topic and theme has just been such a hot topic. And it's true, because we've been focused on building up the feminine divine energy. Why? Because Gaia decided that she wasn't going to sit around and just die off. She awoken herself back in 2012. She basically resuscitated herself, and she's been building up her heartbeat ever since. The heartbeat is the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz. That's why when the Schumann resonance pops off with the solar codes, the sun codes coming in when there's solar flares and solar winds and CMEs, that activates our soul space, and she got resuscitated. She decided she wanted to fight for her life. She decided that she wanted to stay in this game of creation and experimentation. So in let's call it 18, 19, she actually boosted her pulse. This was the first time that there was all of these, significant activities being recorded on the Schumann resonance. And from there, when we moved into the Great Awakening of 2020, and we had the conjunction between Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn and all the other planets, because there was 7 planets that had a major conjunction. This is what astrologers have been talking about for the previous decade. Once that awakening kind of kicked off, Venus was on a totally different mind frame, totally different objective, if you will. And we've been building the feminine divine energy. So on the collectively speaking, I want you to think back to the Me Too movement. As above, so below. So anything that's happening in the cosmos is going to be mimicked and mirrored and manifested here in this physical world. And we can definitely see the uprising that the feminine divine culture has had over the last couple of years. But now it's the masculine energy's time to heal. And so Mars kind of reached out, tried to connect with his lover before knowing that he had to put himself through the ringer as far as some very deep-seated healing goes. And of course, when you want to heal, you go to Virgo energy. So now they're not even within orb. And just as Venus realizes that Mars wasn't coming back for her, that he was like full stop, full charge moving forward in the Virgo energy in order to heal himself, she kind of stood still. And that's where she's at the moment of me recording this session, which is the 19th of July. She is stationed right now. So what does that mean? It means that she's not spinning forward and she's not spinning backwards. She's not moving in her orbit. And this is what happens when a planet gets prepared to retrograde, is that it's called they station. So they're standing still. They're not moving at all. Now on the 22nd, it will appear to us as she's moving backwards. She's technically not. It's just the illusion of all the other planets still moving forward in their orbits and her kind of standing still at a pace that would appear for her to be going in the opposite direction. She will start moving in a different direction. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the different chapters of her retrograde here in a second. But the first day of her retrograde is essentially that last petal of her flower of life being completed. And we are entering into a brand new chapter of this next 8-year cycle, which will essentially, draw out another flower of life with all these different petals as we move through all the different cycles that she's going to go through over the next 8 years. And again, only retrograde in Aries, Gemini, Leo, Scorpio, and Capricorn energy. So it would be a helpful thing just to take a look at your own chart and realize that these are, when Venus is in these particular signs or these particular areas of your chart, this is where major change is happening. And we're going to talk about the cycles here. So let's just say, for instance, that like right now, we are repeating topics and themes and storylines that are deeply integrated to something that happened 8 years ago. And then 16 years ago. And then, you take that, so on and so forth. You're moving through all the different cycles that she's gone through. But the last time that Venus retrograde in Leo energy was in 2015. So if you want to think back to like July to September of 2015, that is going to have some sort of connection to where it is that you're at now. Some kind of repeating theme, some kind of, timeline, storyline situation. There's going to be some kind of relation. And then before that, it was 2007 and July to September. And then before that, it was 1999. Again, July to September. It happens between July and September. When it's going to happen, which is pretty much every 18 months, it's going to happen between July and September for the Leo energy. Just as, the Aries energy is going to be around Aries season, Gemini energy would be around Gemini season, so on and so forth. But you can kind of just take a look at your chart and understand, and then think back to those particular time periods, that major change, major pivots, major relationships, major timeline, storyline jumps happen for you around those particular times. And a lot of that was because of Venus. So again, like I mentioned, even though Venus only goes retrograde in those signs, it doesn't happen at the same degree every time. And again, doesn't happen as far as interactions go with other planets every time. And so even though Venus retrograde can trigger the same like areas or houses of your chart, and there is a little bit of a repeating story, it's never going to be the same because there are different variables. So I want to talk about a couple of the interactions that we want to kind of pay attention for. So right now, I don't think we talked about the yod. There was an ASTRO class where I talked about the different, configurations or patterns or factors in a chart. I don't think we talked about a yod. Y-O-D. So a yod is often known in astrology as the finger of God because it literally looks like something in your chart is pointing to something. So in this case, we're talking about Venus. She's the one that's making kind of the yod. And the yod, the other two pieces to that is Neptune, who is retrograde in its place of power in Pisces energy, and Pluto, who is retrograde in Capricorn energy. So Neptune and Pluto, they're squaring each other, as you can see here. And Venus is kind of like where these energies are pointing to. So just visualize the universe or God or whoever you want, like pointing his finger, like, hey, pay attention to this. This is important. Like, hey, over here, tap, tap, tap. Keep in mind, Neptune and Pluto, they're both generational planets. So we're talking about like a huge group of the collective here, like a huge group of like-minded individuals, basically everyone on Earth right now. Hey, look at this. And what we're pointing to is Venus. And what we're pointing to is her retrograde in this Leo energy. What's even more interesting is that Pluto, at this point in time, under this influence of the yod, is actually squaring, which we know it does create a tension. It does create a conflict, if you will, in order for a change and a transformation to come out of that bumping of heads, if you will. Pluto is currently squaring the nodes of the moon that just shifted into the Aries and Libran axis. So why are we getting a square? Well, because we're talking about all the cardinal energies, and the Aries energy and the Libran energy, they sit across from each other, just as the Cancer and Capricorn energy does, which means that Aries, Capricorn, Libra, Cancer placements, if you have any of those in your chart, they are essentially being triggered and activated by this nodal shift. So we're talking about like major karmic pivot points here. And I know if you tune into me, listen to me for any amount of time, you know that I've been saying like we are going through so many different overlapping cyclic patterns that this is going to be a major change, and thus why we're going through literally such a painful transition right now. Okay, so yeah, that was one aspect that we're talking about here. And this aspect hasn't happened. And this is what I mean. Venus, who is, used to going retrograde in this Leo energy, maybe not at the 28th degree, but nonetheless still in the Leo energy, she hasn't interacted with Neptune retrograde in Pisces. She hasn't interacted with Pluto retrograde in Capricorn because they weren't there. Those planets were not at those particular point or markers at the time of her last retrograde. So this is why every time she goes retrograde, we are experiencing new layers to her reevaluation of herself, of what it is that she wants, of what it is that she loves, because we're getting other interactions from the planets in which she's aspecting. And this is a pretty powerful one because, like I said, the nodes of the moon, we're not messing around. Those are karmic points for sure. And we just have all of these different karmic activations overlapping and happening at one point in time. And so we can all kind of assume right now that our lives, if we were able to take a snapshot of our inner realm, what we were thinking, what we were feeling, who and what we value, what makes us happy, what we want to hold on to, what we want to change. If we were able to take a snapshot of our entire existence and all levels right now and compare it to who it is that we are going to come out of this as in September, it's going to be very different. It's going to be totally, totally different. Take a good look around of where it is that you're at and who is in your life and what it is that you spend the most of your time doing and who and what brings you the most joy and happiness and stability, because it is likely that those particular connections are going to get rearranged in some way. Now, karmically speaking, anything that was built off of ego, that has a weak foundation, a weak connection, and has no spiritual ties whatsoever. So if you've built a relationship that is toxic, if you've built a relationship based off of old self, old values, old pain and trauma that you were essentially trying to heal, you best believe that Venus going retrograde is going to remove those people from your life, because this is about being real and raw and authentic. And each time that we go through these evolutionary periods, to constantly be pushing ourselves up a level of vibration, of frequency, of awareness, of enlightenment. This is how our souls evolve. So every time we have the opportunity to move up and to move onward and to move forward, that means that we have to kind of release some of the heavier baggage, the heavier weight that we've accumulated in life. And that just so happens to be illuminated to us very much in our face when Venus goes retrograde. So let's get back to talking about Venus's retrograde, because there is this whole, there's many things going on within the cycle of Venus herself. So Venus is both an evening star and a morning star, okay? And we know that Venus as a morning star is that Lucifer reference, the light bringer, the brightest light in the sky, right? So again, I'm going to deviate. I don't want to start talking about biblical stuff because I have a lot to say about that. And you know this already. We'll never accomplish what I want to accomplish here in this Astro class. But we have to kind of understand that Venus has a point in time, a chapter, if you will, of being in the bright evening star. And then she has a chapter of when she is the morning star. So Venus in totality has a 584-day cycle. And it's broken up into two chapters. First chapter is Venus as a morning star. And the second chapter is Venus as an evening star. So for about approximately 9 months, Venus rises before the sun. And this is her, what we are going to call morning star phase. She changes, she transforms, she makes the metamorphosis from the evening star into a morning star in the middle of her retrograde cycle. So this is, repetitious, but for this particular purpose, August 13th is going to be the exact middle of her retrograde cycle. So we're entering into the retrograde July 22nd, August 13th. That is when she resets. That's when she transforms. That's when she goes into the metamorphosis that this whole retrograde is supposed to do for her and for us. And this is where the peak of the energy usually happens of the retrograde. And it essentially gives us an opportunity to kind of reset all of the things that Venus rules over. So where we're doing this, in the middle of Leo season and in this Leo energy, and only within a couple of days of the Lionsgate portal, this is going to be a totally rebirthing of the heart space. So essentially on August 13th, that's when the brand new Venus cycle begins. And it's probably I'm going to say it's the most important date in her cycle, but it's not just the only important date of her cycle. So when we take a look at her retrograde cycle, we can see it from two different topics, two different themes, two different ways of looking at it. First, you get 4 phases in Venus's retrograde. And again, they happen every single Venus retrograde, but depending on the degree and depending on the interaction with other planets, that's going to kind of reveal the mission, the purpose that we're currently at. And may I also throw in there, if I haven't already, the yod is just something the finger of God. This is just something happening through this retrograde. This does not happen every time, nor has it happened in these degrees and in these signs with these particular planets. So it's very unique to our lifetime experience that we're seeing it this way. Anyways, I digress. There are 4 chapters, 4 phases, if you will, in Venus's whole retrograde phase. And then you take a look at the interactions that she's making with other planets in those particular chapters. So I'm going to break it down because I think this is really interesting, and I thought I would share it because it's going to help us kind of look at our calendar a little bit differently to understand the different phases. Okay, so phase 1 would be Venus being visible in the sky as an evening star. Okay, so when she's kind of up in the sky and we can see her, and this is in the evening sky point, she starts to lose her vibe. She starts to lose her shininess. She starts to kind of dim her light. This is basically preparing to go retrograde, preparing to go into the underworld. Okay, so when we all have a dark night of the soul, we all move into the underworld, we all move into the shadow realm. It's a time for us to reflect on, ourselves and where we're at and who we are and what we want. Well, this is a time for Venus to really reflect upon who and what is important to her. Therefore, we are figuring out who and what is important to us. We need to identify the good, bad, the ugly of all the kinds of different feelings that we're having, the storylines, the cyclic patterns, the nature, the narrative, all of those things. And we have to examine what needs to stay, what needs to go. What is supporting us and encouraging us, and what is creating obstacles and challenges. And when we're in this phase, the archetype that they kind of attach to this phase is Persephone. So when we're talking about Venus as she's retrograding, in a couple of days and where she's going through here, we want to understand that she's going to go retrograde at 28 degrees in Leo. On the 27th of July, she's going to come up to meet up with Mercury. Mercury's been in this Leo energy. This has a lot to do with the big thoughts, the big ideas, the big gestures to have conversations and heart to hearts and all these lovely things. Mercury will finally be at that 28th degree in Leo. They're going to come together. They're going to conjunct. This is essentially the heart and the head coming together in order to open up the mind space to do a deep dive in our heart space, in our narratives, to really use the intelligence of our mental plane that Mercury rules over to do a deep dive into our values, into our heart space, into our feelings. July 30th, Venus is going to make a positive interaction with Neptune at the 27 degree mark. And again, Neptune is at those latter degrees. So this is how, the direct aspect is actually being made. But Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. It's like I'm going to say it is where anything and everything is possible, where we get our dreams, where we get our visions, our ideas, our inspirations, where our imagination, where our fantasies are. And so when we kind of tap into that type of energy, we're able to bring it into the physical body that Venus rules over, down into the heart space, and then we can manifest it, because that's what Venus does for us here on this earth plane, is she gives us form to bring in the ideas, the values that we want to create, what we want to birth, what we want to bring to life, bring happiness in, create reality, create form of safety, security, happiness, and joy. So that is going to be a very beneficial time for us. So that kind of concludes the phase 1 of her journey. Phase 2, Venus is invisible. Okay, we can't see her, but she's still an evening star. Okay, so if we were able to see her, she would appear in the evening, not the morning, but her light is so dim at this point because she's losing it, she's fading out. You know how I always say that retrogrades are you got drugged? Okay, so she essentially got drugged, and her consciousness, right, is fading, and she feels herself moving into this drug state where she's going to pass out eventually. So this is phase 2, and this is essentially her journey into the underworld. And it is said that this is the most intense time of the retrograde cycle, because it's when we're losing control. It's when we're losing consciousness. It's when we're losing clarity. There's no light, right? We're moving within ourselves, and we're almost getting consumed by the shadow parts, by the darkness within us. And so this is the transformative time of purging, of releasing. This is when you will see a climactic point in, let's say, the relationships that need to be kind of either dissolved entirely or rearranged in the power element or the energetic element. Because this is a time where the snake would essentially shed its skin. And so we're in preparation for a rebirth, but what precedes a birth? Death, right? So this is kind of like the death phase. Now, in this particular instance, Venus is going to make some pretty intense aspects. First of all, with Lilith, who I personally don't talk about as much in the astrology reports because it's I find Lilith and Black Moon Lilith a very personal identity issue in a chart. It's not something that I think collectively makes a lot of sense when there are just so many different ways to interpret it. But Lilith is basically the first Eve, if we want to say that. She's the original feminine energy, and she's gotten a bad rap over the years, especially through mythology as well, as just being like the darker feminine energy. But again, dark doesn't mean bad. It just means that we're drawing our power from a different source, if you will. But Venus is going to be making some pretty interesting and intense aspects with Lilith and with Uranus. And so Uranus, the great awakener, who is pushing to liberate us and free us and make us more independent, probably going to illuminate where it is, especially in relationship dynamics, that we're feeling trapped. Like we're feeling like we're too overwhelmed and enmeshed with the other person, where we've lost our identity. This is going to be a realization, again, an awakening to where it is that maybe we need more freedom, need more space to be ourselves. But trust me when I say that the topics and themes that your soul is meant to address, it's not something that you're going to have to sit around and be like, I wonder what it's going to be for me. Like, it's going to be in your face. It's not something that you're going to be able to ignore. You're going to wish that it wasn't happening and that you could ignore it, but chances are you're not going to be able to. And so just understand that this isn't something that you should be sitting around going, I wonder if this is what I should be focused on for Venus's retrograde. No, like, trust me, you're not even going to have an awareness about it until it's happening. And you're like, oh shit. Okay, this is what I'm going to be experiencing for Venus's retrograde. Trust me, you're not going to have to question a lot about it. Anywho, this particular phase, if you will, does align with the archetype, which is Lilith. And she, again, is the dark feminine energy. I want to give you an analogy so that you just aren't aligning with it being a bad thing. When a mother is in a situation where her child is in danger and that mama bear comes out, she is aligning with her dark force energy, with the darker warrior type spirit that sometimes, the feminine energy has to stand in order to protect and defend what it is that she's created and what it is that she loves and who it is that she is and what matters to her. And so to say, if you were seeing a mother who was, standing up and protecting their child, especially from harm, you would not look at that person and be like, oh, wow, she is a negative individual. You know what I mean? She's got a bad vibe. No, what she's doing is she's standing in her dark feminine power. And this is what I continually and will continue to kind of preach, is that dark does not equal bad. It's just a different power. It's a different part of ourselves that we pull from. It's that animalistic nature that gets us through this earth plane, through the survival mode. But we do so in a dark feminine way. The feminine energies are to protect that in which we love, that in what we've built, that in what we've created. The nurturing energy brings out that darkest, fiercest defender part. And in no way is that bad. So I just wanted to kind of make that connection for you. But yeah, we attach this particular phase of Venus's retrograde to the Lilith type of energy. So like, for instance, August 3rd to August 6th, Venus is going to be invisible in the sky. And the reason why is because technically speaking, she falls below the horizon line, and that's what we would be considered the underworld. And I'm not going to get into flat Earth right now, but whether you are looking at it from a heliocentric or a geocentric nature or theory, it is still the same. There is still a horizon. There is still above. There is still below. In whichever way that you align with whatever theory you believe in, it's still the same shit. She becomes invisible to our naked eye because she's not in the distance that she is supposed to be as far as being high up in the sky, and she's not as bright. She's losing her light because she's essentially been drugged. She's lost her consciousness. She's no longer in her awareness, and now she's kind of moving to those dark places. So, and again, don't come at me if those dates are a little bit, like, there is some flexibility there depending on where it is that you live. We all are at different degrees of how this land mass is mapped out. So again, like, just general vicinity of dates here. But August 3rd to August 6th, this is where we can no longer see her and where she kind of descends, if you will, falling below that horizon line. On August 8th, which you may already know is the Lionsgate portal, and you may already know how I feel about calling the Lionsgate portal a portal, but nonetheless, it's a very powerful date of alignment, mostly due to our alignment with the star Regularis, which is the brightest star in the Leo constellation, and that's why it's a whole thing. I'll probably do another podcast on the Lionsgate portal when we get closer to it, but just know that the Lionsgate portal every year offers us a timeline jump, soul contract, renewal, and initiation. It's a time where very, very deep karmic choices are made, let's say. So on August 8th, Venus is going to come up to, bump into, team up with Black Moon Lilith. So Lilith and Black Moon Lilith are two different things. So let me just, pause and state that. Black Moon Lilith is like the dark, emotional, unconscious part of the Lilith energy. And the Lilith energy, again, she was the first feminine energy. She precedes Eve. She was cast away because Lilith didn't want to be equal to man. She knew that she was the portal in order to create human earth beings. So why would we lay next to a man, let alone below a man? We were not made from a man's rib. Do not let that fool you. Anyways, there's a whole mythology regarding the Lilith energy that I may have to dive into in a different podcast as well, because I can't cover it here. But just know that Black Moon Lilith and Lilith are two different things, embody two different energies. And Black Moon Lilith is going to be at 23 degrees in Leo at the same time as Venus reaches that 23rd degree in Leo, as we align with the Lionsgate portal, which, if that doesn't scream choice point, I don't know what would. And then August 9th, we have Venus. Now listen to this. This will just blow your mind as well, because it blew mine. August 9th, so just the day after, Venus will be at 22 degrees in Leo. 22 is a master number. It's a very magical number. So Venus is at 22 degrees in Leo, and then she squares, right? She squares, creating a tension and a conflict in order for immediate change to happen, with Uranus, the Great Awakener, who is in the Taurus energy at 22 degrees. Oh my goodness. Okay, so let me just give it to you this way. Again, Uranus is the Great Awakener. Something is an aha moment. Something is an epiphany. We have a change of perspective. We have a change of heart, Leo energy. Uranus is in Taurus energy, which is our physical realm. And we have been desperately holding on to people, places, things, possessions, and attachments in the fear that we will not be able to fill the void with something better. Uranus has been trying to show us over the last couple of years on where it is that these attachments are actually creating the challenges and the obstacles that are preventing us from actually moving on and making the progress that we want to make. So what I'm getting at is that this is going to be a profound time of change, likely affecting a change of heart, a change in our physical circumstances where routines, relationships, and money matters are concerned, letting go of something that we probably have been holding on to for way longer than we should, longer than we've outgrown it for sure. But what I love about this is that the Taurus energy, Venus rules over the Taurus energy. Okay, let's just be clear about that. She is squaring another planet, another energy in her hometown, in her place of power. And what we get here is that when the change of heart happens in the Leo energy, we're able to bring whatever change that is taking place in our heart space into form, into creation in a very fast way, because Uranus wants spontaneous change for the better good. So, the Taurus energy is where we build, where we create, where we stabilize. And this is a tension point that is going to show where the weaker parts are, where the collapse is needed, where the deconstruction is needed in order for us to build something better in its place. So this is like very profound. I hope it's as mind-blowing to you as it was to me when I was, mapping these events out and realizing like all the divine numbers and all the cyclic overlapping natures and patterns that are collapsing and being built. This is a profound time. So this brings us into our phase 3 of Venus. So Venus, who is now invisible, who now just moved into the underworld, who basically in mythology, this is really going to mess you up because the archetype doesn't match this particular phase, but in mythology, when Aphrodite, or when Venus, if you will, ended up in the underworld, in hell, in Hades with Pluto, who is Hades, that is when she embodied the persona of Persephone, which was basically the queen of the souls of the damned, who were kind of chained here to earth. This is the point. When she becomes a morning star, she is the goddess of the underworld, okay? But she's still invisible in phase 3. We can't see her. This is when Venus, who is retrograde, and the sun, who is moving through Leo energy at this point in time in the calendar, where they meet up. So as you know, the sun, which is our soul, which is our life force energy, our ego avatar, which is basically the light codes of evolution that are downloaded into us when the CMEs, the solar flares, the solar winds pop off. When the sun meets any planet and conjuncts, teams up with, meets up with, sits beside any planet, we say that the sun is combust, like it's a resetting of that energy, so to speak. So when Venus, who is retrograde, meets the sun, that's a conjunction. That's a reset of the energy. So this is a time where we start to piece together who it is that we are. Again, ego avatar. What it is that we want, what we're excited about, what we're passionate about. Again, a reset of the life force energy. That's when we actually get an aha moment on what it is that we actually want for ourselves. And once you can figure out what you want, then you know the direction that you need to take in order to get it. And this is essentially what is setting us up to pursue the desires that we now are realizing that we have for the next Venus cycle. So realistically, like this is a very karmic, very strong, like karmic manifesting time, if you will. Like when we look at it, so this, again, August 13th is the major, most important day. And that's when the sun conjuncts Venus at this 20 degrees in Leo energy. And this is the ending of the last 584-day cycle of Venus. And this is when we begin a new 584-day cycle of Venus. And again, it's just because we are ending the completion of the flower of life orbit pattern taking place. All the 5 petals of the flower have been essentially written in the stars over this last cycle. So this is why I say to you, like, we're closing the door on this last chapter, but we're equally opening up the door to the next. And it is when the sun and Venus come together and have that combust, have that interaction, have that reset energy that closes the door on the old and positions us to figure out how we're going to pursue the new, essentially. So it's at this point that Venus is, going through her deepest of transformations. Not sure if I mentioned this. I might have skipped over it just because I didn't want to confuse you with the Persephone type of mythology. But the archetype, like the version of the feminine energy that we are in phase 3, is Eve. Okay, so Eve, again, a bunch of lies, but Eve was essentially the first woman. We were told that she was created at Adam's rib. Again, bunch of bullshit, but I'm not getting into the Bible rant here in this one. But the Eve energy is the, let's call it calm, gentle, complacent energy where we're in our most raw, innocent form of that feminine creator energy. And so I guess it's fitting for this reset, but nonetheless, we're in the Eve archetype energy. So that's the 13th. That is the beginning of a brand new cycle. On the 14th, Venus is going to trine, which is a beautiful energy, with Chiron, the wounded healer. Now, Chiron will be retrograde at that time as well. And this is going to take place at 19 degrees. So Venus is at 19 degrees in Leo energy. Chiron is in 19 degrees in Aries energy. It's a fire on fire interaction. That's what gives us our trine. And one thing we know about fire is that it cleans us up pretty fast. It's initiating, it's exciting, it's passionate, it's powerful, it's life force energy, it's vitality. And Chiron, being the wounded healer, he's retrograde, really ready to examine the issues that are still alive and well, the wound, the pain, the trauma that's still alive and well, in order for us to heal it and actually do it. Like, not just say, oh yeah, maybe I should heal that, but actually take action to purposefully address these issues and to resolve them, which is going to be a change in pace for all of us as well. On the 15th, Venus is going to conjunct the moon. Oh my goodness, at 18 degrees in this Leo energy. So let me just say that emotionally speaking, this is our reset. Just as, when the sun interacts with the planet, there's a reset. When the moon interacts with the planet, there's a reset. The sun resets our ego, our vitality, our life force energy, our outward realms. The moon resets our emotions, our unconscious, our intuition realms, our inward realms. And so this is a big deal. And Venus conjunct the moon, it means that we are starting a new emotional cycle. We do know what we want. We are following our intuition. We are hypersensitive. We know what we want. We know what we got to do. So this is, and again, in Leo energy, it gives us the boldness, the bravery, the courage to do what we need to do to actually go after the things that we know we need to go after. So this is going to be a very welcome change in pace as well. The 22nd of August is when Venus is going to square, again, tension point, conflict, with Jupiter. So Jupiter, 15 degrees in Taurus energy that Venus naturally rules over. Keep that in mind. Jupiter will be in Taurus energy until May of 2024. We have a whole year of an opportunity to totally rearrange our physical realms and to build a physical realm that looks good, that feels good, with new opportunities for growth and abundance around every friggin' corner, where happiness, joy, pleasure, safety, and security is concerned. It is going to be a very low and slow process. That's what the Taurus energy is all about. It's a fixed sign. It's resistant to change, but it is going to have a major impact on our physical realm. Venus squaring Jupiter is an opportunity to see where growth is taking place. I was going to say needed, but it's not really needed. We know where we want to go. We know what we want. We know what we got to do. We're just kind of in the state of paralysis because we haven't taken the actions to make anything happen. We're still in a reflective, contemplative state. So it's going to feel challenging because we're going to have to bust away, break away, collapse, detach, disconnect from some of the things that we've been resistant to let go of here in our physical realm, where the ways that we feel or think about ourselves is concerned, how we value ourselves, where skills and talents are concerned, where routines, relationships, resources are concerned. We've been afraid to let them go, so to speak. And now this particular interaction is going to illuminate for us that, listen, In order for you to get what it is that you just identified you now desire, you're going to have to let some things go, and you're going to have to create a new opportunity in order for you to build a life that actually supports you and going after those things that you've now identified that you want. So it is a little bit of a challenge, but it is going to reveal to us how it is that we are going to move forward, make some progress in really kind of gaining momentum and distance and proximity to the things that we're now identifying that we truly want to pursue. So now we're moving into phase 4. Phase 4 is when Venus now becomes visible in the morning sky. Okay, so she is our morning star now. Venus is going to rise as the brightest freaking star in the morning. And this is essentially her way of saying, hey, bitch, I'm back, right? Like, she has just been reborn, essentially. And she's rising in the morning sky to say, listen, I'm here. I know who I am now. I know what I want now. I know what I gotta do now. There's no stopping me. And this particular phase of the feminine energy is very much in alignment with Aphrodite. And this is the goddess energy. So, you know, where Eve was like that innocent, naive type of gentle, calm, complacent energy, just kind of, you know, doing whatever that quote unquote first man tells her to do. Aphrodite is like, listen, bitch, I've been through hell. Okay. Got the t-shirt, been there, got the t-shirt, probably going to go back in a couple of months, right? Because that's when she retrogrades again. But she's like proud that she has basically gone through this transformation. And so on August 23rd, this is when Venus is going to be visible again as the morning star. And again, don't come at me because it does vary depending on, you know, time zone and where it is that you're at in the world. But around the 23rd, that's when the majority of us will see her reappear in the morning sky. The 29th of August, we have Venus at 12 degrees in Leo, which is interesting because she's going direct at that 12 degrees. Venus is going to be opposite the moon. The moon is going to be at 12 degrees in Aquarius energy. Aquarius energy sits across from the Leo energy. Leo energy is our unique individual expression of self. Aquarius is the collective. Aquarius energy is where we essentially dim our light in order to fit in. The Leo energy is where we light ourselves on fire, just trying to stand out. And so to be opposite the moon, okay, that's our emotions, that's our intuition, that's our unconscious self. We were just jamming with this new cycle. Emotionally speaking, we are just in alignment with the moon on the 15th. Here we are, the 29th of August, and now we're at odds with our emotions. Now, why is that, you may ask? Well, because when you rebirth yourself, you have to get to know yourself all over again. You have to establish new emotional boundaries all over again. There's a lot of upheaval in collapsing and disconnecting, detaching from the old structures, the old relationships, the old whatever that we just decided we were no longer in alignment with. There's a lot that we have to get to know again. And because we've had this new lease on life, we have a new emotional coding, a new emotional programming, conditioning to actually rewire into our system. So we are going to feel a little bit at odds. But nonetheless, we are going to go direct on September 3rd. And that will bring an ending to Venus's retrograde. And also a little fun fact, you know, she's retrograde for 40 days. And so when we break those 40 days up into the 4 phases or the 4 chapters that we just kind of covered, it's like 10 days per chapter. And I think it's also interesting that like the 40 days thing, you know, where like 40 is a pretty powerful number. If we were talking about numerology, if you will, that would kind of be the number 4. And the 4 is foundation, it's stability. It's a new launching pad, if you will. It's everything that we have been working towards building. So that's pretty significant. But like the number 40 in, I want to say mythology, but I also don't want, Christians coming at me. I don't know that we have any Bible thumpers here, but if we do, I do apologize because I don't really have a lot of fond things to say about the Bible, as you may already know. But anyways, Bible talk for a second. Jesus was supposedly out in the wilderness, tempted for 40 days. And in other quote unquote religions or mythologies, whichever way you want to look at it, Buddha was said to have fasted and meditated for those 40 days. So the reason why 40 is so significant in, I think, mythology or religious context, whichever way you want to look at it, is because it's supposed to act as like the trial period. And, when you're being tested with trials and challenges and tribulations, then you get rewarded. And it just seems like the 40 days that Venus needs to be retrograde in order to kind of get to know herself and to be reborn again is very, very much in alignment with some of, again, I'm going to call it religious / mythological theories, context, stories, that 40 days seems to be the toughest part of things. Those 40 days of Lent, 40, that 40 number is very significant with trials and tribulations that precede the revelation and the transformation of reward. So it does kind of feel like we all have to be put through the ringer, if you will, in order to figure out who it is that we are, what it is that we want, and who it is that we desire to be. So guys, hopefully that made a lot of sense. Hopefully it shed a little bit of a new light on why, Venus's retrograde is especially more, I'm going to say, important than some of the other retrogrades. And it's literally because it has everything to do with our heart, with what we love, with who we love, with how we love. And as you know, love is the driving force of what is going to break us out of this, matrix realm. Love conquers all. Love always wins. And when we look at the context of love, we have to take a look at Venus and her orbit, her journey through the cosmos, and how that taking a place above us has a direct impact on us here, who are essentially below these gods and goddesses, quote unquote. But just remember that we're not worshiping a planet. We're not worshiping anything. What we're doing is honoring the creation that the one universal source God created in all of its glory, which are all of the parts of self. And that studying astrology and really just appreciating the journey that astrology can teach us about these particular energies going through their metamorphosis. As you've caught on, I haven't been able to say that word correctly once in this podcast. But what I'm getting at is that, we're not worshiping, we're not honoring planets. We're not doing anything but using the creation of the universal source, God, and what he has done in order to show us that we are made up of all of these energies, that there is a part of us that is being triggered and activated with the stories, with the orbit, with the journey of each of these individual planets and the energy, the archetype that they actually represent in our personal development. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. And definitely check your chart, see where this is happening for you. And even more than that, if you can make any kind of connection to any of the previous time periods that I rattled off, if you feel like sharing, definitely drop that in the comments as well. But I think you'll be pretty mind blown to see the connections of the topics and themes that are about to be unearthed in order for us to evolve to the next chapter. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sending you nothing but love, and we'll talk to you soon.